We are not what happened to us. We are what we wish to become. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. What you resist persists, but will grow in size. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. Mistakes are, after all, the foundations of truth, and if a man does not know what a thing is, it is at least an increase in knowledge if he knows what it is not. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light of meaning in the darkness of mere being. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. There's no coming to consciousness without pain. In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. Show me a sane man and I will cure him for you. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. As a child, I felt myself to be alone, and I am still, because I know things and must hint at things which others apparently know nothing of, and for the most part do not want to know. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. Whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Sensation tell us a thing is. Thinking tell us what it is this thing is. Feeling tells us what this thing is to us. There are as many nights as days, and the one is just as long as the other in the year's course. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. Shame is a soul-eating emotion. I must also have a dark side if I am to be whole. An understanding heart is everything in a teacher and cannot be esteemed highly enough. One looks back with appreciation to the brilliant teachers, but with gratitude to those who touched our human feeling. The curriculum is so much necessary raw material, but warmth is the vital element for the growing plant and for the soul of the child. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Every human life contains a potential. If that potential is not fulfilled, then that life was wasted. We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. Anyone who attempts to do both, to adjust to his group and at the same time pursue his individual goal, becomes neurotic. No matter how much his rightness is supported by public opinion or moral code. It is often tragic to see how blatantly a man bungles his own life and the lives of others, yet remains totally incapable of seeing how much the whole tragedy originates in himself and how he continually feeds it and keeps it going. If there is anything that we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it is not something that could better be changed in ourselves. About 1/3 of my cases are suffering from no clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. This can be defined as the general neurosis of our times. Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment and especially on their children than the unlived life of the parent. The best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow onto others. We should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. We apprehend it just as much by feeling. Therefore, the judgment of the intellect is, at best, only the half of truth and must, if it be honest, also come to an understanding of its inadequacy. I have frequently seen people become neurotic when they content themselves with inadequate or wrong answers to the questions of life. They seek position, marriage, reputation, outward success of money, and remain unhappy and neurotic even when they have attained what they were seeking. Such people are usually confined within too narrow a spiritual horizon. Their life has not sufficient content, sufficient meaning. If they are enabled to develop into more spacious personalities, the neurosis generally disappears. Deep down below the surface of the average man's conscience, he hears a voice whispering, "It all depends on how we look at things, and not on how things are in themselves. The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." To find out what is truly individual in ourselves, profound reflection is needed. And suddenly we realize how uncommonly difficult the discovery of individuality is. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects it loves. The reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories. Nights through dreams tell the myths forgotten by the day. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. Through pride, we are ever deceiving ourselves. But deep down below the surface of the average conscience, a still small voice says to us, something is out of tune. If the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. It is far better take things as they come along with patience and equanimity. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Sometimes you have to do something unforgivable just to be able to go on living. In each of us there is another whom we do not know. Without this playing with fantasy, no creative work has ever yet come to birth. The debt we owe to the play of the imagination is incalculable. The bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. Every mother contains her daughter in herself, and every daughter her mother, and every mother extends backwards into her mother and forwards into her daughter. The true leader is always led. What if I should discover that the poorest of the beggars and the most impudent of offenders are all within me, and that I stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved? What then? Midlife is the time to let go of an over-dominant ego and to contemplate the deeper significance of human existence. There can be no transforming of darkness into light and of apathy into movement without emotion. Words are animals, alive with a will of their own. Nobody can fall so low unless he has a great depth. If such a thing can happen to a man, it challenges his best and highest on the other side. That is to say, this depth corresponds to a potential height, and the blackest darkness to a hidden light. If one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool. My whole being was seeking for something still unknown, which might confer meaning upon the banality of life. We are born at a given moment, in a given place, and like vintage years of wine, we have the qualities of the year and of the season in which we are born. Find out what a person fears most, and that is where he will develop next. Faith, hope, love, and insight are the highest achievements of human effort. They are found given by experience. I don't aspire to be a good man. I aspire to be a whole man. The highest, most decisive experience is to be alone with one's own self. You must be alone to find out what supports you when you find that you cannot support yourself. Only this experience can give you an indestructible foundation. The bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. Children are educated by what the grown-up is and not by his talk. Life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you're just doing research. The majority of my patients consisted not of believers, but of those who had lost their faith. People don't have ideas. Ideas have people. Somewhere right at the bottom of one's own being, one generally does know where one should go and what one should do, but there are times when the clown we call I behaves in such a distracting fashion that the inner voice cannot make its presence felt. Every mother contains her daughter in herself, and every daughter her mother, and every mother extends backwards into her mother and forwards into her daughter. I am looking forward enormously to getting back to the sea again, where the overstimulated psyche can recover in the presence of that infinite peace and spaciousness. The fool is the precursor to the savior. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. Whenever we give up, leave behind, and forget too much, there is always the danger that the things we have neglected will return with added force.